Well, authorities in Miami are ramping up security near the federal courthouse, where President Donald Trump will surrender today to face charges for retaining and mishandling classified documents, including top-secret information about U.S. nuclear weapons. On Friday, the Justice Department unsealed a historic 37-count indictment against Trump, who's running for the White House again. In recent days, Trump and many of his supporters have condemned the charges using inflammatory language. Andy Biggs, a far-right member of Congress from Arizona, wrote on social media, quote, "We've now reached a war phase, an eye for an eye." Louisiana Republican Congressman Clay Higgins wrote a cryptic tweet that many viewed as a call for insurrection. Former Arizona Republican gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake directly threatened violence.
I have a message tonight for Merrick Garland and Jack Smith and Joe Biden. And the guys back there in the fake news media, you should listen up as well. This one's for you. If you want to get to President Trump, you're going to have to go through me, and you're going to have to go through 75 million Americans just like me. And I'm going to tell you, yep, most of us are card-carrying members of the NRA. That's not a threat. That's a public service announcement.
Kari Lake's comments were widely criticized. Ruben Gallego, a Democrat running for Senate in Arizona, responded by saying, quote, "This language isn't just hyperbole. It's dangerous, and it threatens the very core of our democracy," unquote. Donald Trump has repeatedly attacked Special Counsel Jack Smith, calling him a deranged lunatic and a thug. On Saturday, Trump spoke in Columbus, Georgia, about what he called the final battle.
Now the Marxist left is once again using the same corrupt DOJ and the same corrupt FBI and the Attorney General and the local district attorneys to interfere in our elections at a level that our country and few countries have ever seen before. They're cheating, they're crooked, they're corrupt. These criminals cannot be rewarded. They must be defeated. You have to defeat them.
We're joined now by Ruth Ben-Ghiat, an expert on fascism and authoritarianism, author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present, professor of history and Italian studies at New York University. She also publishes the newsletter Lucid on threats to democracy. Professor Ben-Ghiat, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. So tomorrow we'll spend more time after the arraignment talking about all of the counts. But today we're focusing on the threats, on the violent threats. Can you respond?
Yes, so this could be seen as this reaction to Trump's indictment and the appearance in Miami. It could be seen by his most fanatic followers as a kind of spark for a second wave of the insurrection. That's certainly the tone of Kari Lake and Clay Higgins and these other MAGA extremists. But Trump has been preparing this in two ways for many years. First of all, since 2015, he used his rallies. So back, we're talking, 7, 8 years now. He used his rallies as radicalization sites. And over, he told his supporters at these rallies that violence was a good way to solve conflict. How many times do you say, oh, in the good old days, we used to be able to punch people and nothing happened? So that discourse of violence, which encouraged January 6th, is part of this. The other is his victim cult. So this won't be a surrender for MAGA extremists. This will be an act of victimization. And all strongmen since Mussolini say they're victims, and this is very compelling to their followers because they feel protective of him. And this is part of their leader cult. And January 6th, of course, he summoned the faithful to help him in his time of distress. So that narrative is continuing now.
Well, but Professor, how do you account for how few Republicans are standing up to this situation? Of course, Mitt Romney is one of the few, but most are not only lining up behind Trump, but those who are candidates are promising to pardon him if they're elected.
This is because I see the GOP as a scholar of authoritarianism. It is an autocratic party operating inside a democracy, and it is a party in thrall to a cult leader. And Donald Trump, I've been studying cult leaders for 100 years worth of them. He has all the signs. He is not a conventional politician of either the Democratic or Republican, old school. He is a cult leader. And the GOP has long been, submissive to him. He put them under an authoritarian discipline. And then he made them complicit. And this is what corrupt, violent authoritarians do. They make you part of their crimes. And so the GOP is in damage control mode. And, there's fear, there's fanaticism, and they don't see a way to break away because they're cowards, or they've bought into this war, this battle that he's waging.
And you said that if Trump gets back into power, he'll never leave. What's at stake in this upcoming election, and also how do you place him in the context of growing right-wing movements in the industrialized West?
Yeah, I said that he would never leave if he gets back in because he's saying that the other day when he said to his followers, "I'll never leave." On the one hand, this was part of his cult leader devotional kind of homily to them, where he says, "I love you, I'll always be there for you." But it's also telling them, and he always says what he's going to do ahead of time, that if he gets back into power, he will not leave. And he's already talked about, massive purges, and he's got a whole plan that he will pick up and finish the job of wrecking democracy that he couldn't finish before.
Professor Ben-Ghiat, I also want to ask you about the death of Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, which has declared a national day of mourning for Wednesday. The billionaire media tycoon served 4 terms as Prime Minister of Italy, where he leveraged his unrivaled influence over public opinion in Italy, controlling the newspapers, magazines, 3 major TV channels. Throughout his career, Berlusconi faced multiple charges of money laundering, or at least of corruption, criminal charges including abuse of office, bribery, paying for sex with an underage girl. Most of the charges ended in dismissals after Berlusconi's government passed laws shielding him from prosecution. But a tax fraud conviction in 2013 barred him from public office for 6 years. Can you talk about what Berlusconi represented?
There's lots of lessons for us today in the Berlusconi era. 2 things I'll mention. Berlusconi set off the whole normalization of the far right. Without him, it would have been a lot slower and harder. In 1994, it was just a brief government, but he brought neo-fascists into the government and made a center-right coalition with the xenophobic Northern League, now they're called the League, and this neo-fascist party. So he broke a taboo. And during his other 2 governments in the 2000s, the culture of neo-fascism, the culture of fascism itself, which he repeatedly whitewashed. He said to some British journalists, including Boris Johnson was one of them back in 2003, that Mussolini never killed anyone. So what we see today with the revival of neo-fascism and somebody like Giorgia Meloni, the prime minister, who says, "Oh, I'm a conservative," that whitewashing comes straight out of Berlusconi. And by the way, he gave her her start. The other lesson is prosecution matters. Berlusconi was so able, as you said, he got the parliament to pass laws. If he was accused of bribery, he got Parliament to pass a law saying that bribery wasn't an offense you could be jailed for. And he did this over and over again, or he ran out the clock, very similar to Trump. But finally, 2 years after he left office, he was convicted. And he didn't go to jail because of his age. But it was that conviction and being banned from politics that finally deflated his personality cult and made his party, which he had created, into a minor force in politics. So prosecution sends a message that no one is above the law.
I wanted to ask you about how the media should deal with a figure such as Donald Trump. On the one hand, we have to cover some of the major events that happened related to him. On the other hand, the saturation coverage also provides him more and more free publicity and a platform. What's the proper balance that journalists and the media should exercise in your view?
Yeah, that's been the question since 2016. However, after January 6th, I think that people who didn't see the danger before perhaps see it now, and it's been a little disheartening that some in the media have returned to the default position of treating him as a conventional candidate. Of course, there was the disastrous CNN town hall where people were not allowed to criticize; they were only supposed to applaud, and that actually recreated an authoritarian plateau. It was perfect for him. Other people, they don't, for example, they don't retweet not only Trump but these other MAGA extremists, because that extra engagement is figured into algorithms that promote these people. You can screenshot them. But we do need to cover it, and I speak about it all the time because we can't close our eyes to this danger. Every society that's had a serious threats to democracy has gone into it with some denial, with some idea that it can't happen here, including Germany in the early 30s, which was one of the most advanced scientific, graphic design, cultural societies in the world. And so it's important to cover it, to not shy away from denouncing it, but also to frame it for what it really is.
Ruth Ben-Ghiat, we want to thank you for being with us, expert on fascism and authoritarianism, author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present.